Today we're going to be focusing on water. Now you might wonder why we're studying water in biology, but all life occurs in water. All of those chemical reactions going on inside your body, inside of your cells, they're all happening in solution. We're full of kind of watery stuff. So if we don't understand water, we won't understand some of the really amazing things that are going on inside and around us. Now, if we look at the chemical formula or the structure of a molecule of water, it's just H2O, right? So it's a hydrogen covalently bonded to two oxygens. Now, this is going to be important. So your hydrogen is going to be, your hydrogen, you have your two hydrogens, and then here's your oxygen. Now these right here are going to be the electrons that are shared. Hydrogen comes with one electron, and oxygen is going to share one electron with it. Now, this is what we call a covalent bond, but it's a polar covalent bond. That oxygen molecule is stronger or more electronegative than the hydrogen. And so it's going to share, but it's not going to fully share. It's going to kind of hog the electron's attention, and so it gets this partial negative charge. The hydrogens then have this partial positive charge. So you see that kind of funny symbol right there? That just means partial. So it's not a full charge, but it's just a little bit positive. And so here's a positive side and here's the negative side. And this is what gives water all of its really cool properties. This idea that it's polar. It has a slightly negative side and a slightly positive side. Pretty much everything we talk about has to do with that polarity and its ability to form these hydrogen bonds. So these are going to be really weak bonds in between the partially positive part of one water molecule and the partially negative part of another water molecule. So again, they form those hydrogen bonds. They're kind of sticky. Your positive hydrogen or slightly positive hydrogen is attracted to that slightly negative oxygen. And so they kind of want to be near each other and they want to arrange in a certain way. Everything water can do, and it can do a lot of really cool things, is because it's polar and it forms hydrogen bonds. So if ever in doubt, the answer is probably hydrogen bonds because water is polar. Now, we're going to discuss 5 properties of water. You may want to pause it here and then write down each of these properties and leave some space so you can go and fill in the explanation of each of these. I'm going to go through them one at a time. So let's start with cohesion and adhesion. So cohesion is water sticking to itself. Adhesion is water sticking to other polar molecules. So like cohabitate, it's cohesion, it's sticking to itself. And this gives you really cool things like surface tension. They're one of the reasons why a straw will work. Adhesion is hydrogen bonding between water and other substances that either have a charge or are slightly polar. So it sticks to other polar molecules. And this, again, gives us these really kind of cool things that it can do, like capillary action, a meniscus, if you remember that word from when you're reading a graduated cylinder, you read from the bottom of that little curve. If you've ever seen those commercials for the Bounty paper towels where they put it down and the water just spreads through the paper towel. Well, it's going to do that on any paper towel because the paper towel is polar, the paper molecules, and the water is polar, and so the water will kind of climb through the towel or cloth. So here's an example. There's a picture. You can see that surface tension. So the bug is distributing its weight, and its feet, it's kind of floating on top. Now, if you've ever done a belly flop, you've totally felt that surface tension of the water. The water molecules on top are attracted to each other. And so when you go face first into that water, you need to break those hydrogen bonds. So by themselves, they're weak bonds, but you get enough of them together, and they definitely pack a punch. There's our meniscus there. You can see that little smiley. At the bottom of it is where you would read that. It's also going to help water move from roots to the tops of trees. And I'll put that link for a video on that in Blend. All right, so there's cohesion, where the water molecules are sticking to each other as they move up the xylem. And then there's also this kind of adhesion as they're sticking to the sides of the xylem. Water is a great solvent. That means that it will dissolve other polar molecules. Now, not everything is polar, but most things are polar, which is why water dissolves a lot of different things. So it will dissolve salt, sugar, all of those things are going to have some sort of charge, and so the water molecule surrounds those. Some of the vocabulary here, you have solvents, dissolve solutes, creating solutions. So let's say you're making sugar water. The water would be the solvent. The sugar is the solute. And when you mix those together and they go into solution, that's going to be your solution. Some things don't dissolve in water, and those are going to be your oils, your fats, and they don't because they're called hydrophobic, like they're water-fearing, because they're non-polar. So they don't have a charge, and so they won't readily go into solution. If something does dissolve in water, we say that it's hydrophilic, water-loving. And that means that it's attracted because it's polar. It has some sort of charge, and so that interacts with those polar portions of the water molecule. All right, next we come to ice. Who would have thought ice was so special? Most substances, I can't think of any that aren't, are more dense when they're solid than when they're liquid. But water is not. So ice actually floats, which is so weird. But that's because those hydrogen bonds, remember the positive part wants to be near the negative part of another water molecule. And so when they go into that solid form, they're going to try really hard to form this kind of crystalline structure so that everybody's happy. And to do that, they space out, which gives them that less dense structure. Now, this is really kind of important. If ice didn't float, then oceans and lakes would be freezing solid, right? Because the ice would form and then sink to the bottom, form and then sink to the bottom, and so it would never actually defrost at the very bottom of a lake. During the winter, that surface ice actually serves as an insulator for the water below. It also contributes to this, what we call seasonal turnover. So, and again, we're in Austin, Texas, so you don't see this very often, but in places where bodies of water tend to freeze and have a layer of ice on top, I promise you it happens some places. That top layer, when it does melt, it will sink down to the bottom because it's actually going to be kind of a little bit more dense. If you've ever gone swimming and felt like by your feet, that thermocline where it's colder by your feet, that's a good example of that like density. So that cold water layer, and also you have the sun warming the upper layers, right? When that happens, you can also have this moving of the water, which helps distribute nutrients. Okay, specific heat is another really kind of interesting one. So really, specific heat is talking about how much energy do you need to put into something for it to change temperature and then also to change phase. Water resists those changes in temperature. And one of the reasons, again, is because of that polarity and those hydrogen bonds. So it's going to arrange itself and it's going to have that attraction. And so it's going to take a lot of energy for it to move away from those other water molecules that it's attracted to. So we say it has a high specific heat. If you compare it, the kind of classic comparison is if you look at your metal pot and the water inside of it, the pot heats up a lot faster than the water that's inside of the pot. The pot, the metal, has a lower specific heat, so it takes less energy to get it to change temperature than the water, which takes a while to heat up. This is going to be really important for moderating temperature. So places that are close to large bodies of water have more moderate temperatures. So they don't get quite as hot in the summer or quite as cold in the winter. And that's because those big bodies of water are absorbing a lot of heat in the summertime and then releasing some of that heat in the wintertime. Here, we're looking at heated vaporization. So how much energy needs to be added for that liquid water to become water vapor or a gas. And there's a lot of heat that needs to be added in order to do that. And when it does go into the water vapor, that energy is released. So this actually becomes important when you think about sweating. One of the reasons that you sweat is to lower your body temperature. So as that water or sweat evaporates off, it actually removes some energy and it cools down. It's called evaporative cooling. You'll also see animals that pant. That's another way to achieve that evaporative cooling from their tongue. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to mention to do with water is the pH scale. And you guys have probably heard about this. This is kind of how we measure how strong an acid or base something is. And here you can see in this pH scale, you've got neutral in the middle. So lucky number 7 is neutral. And then the further away from it you get, the stronger the acid or base becomes. So if 7 is neutral, anything lower than 7 is an acid. Anything above 7 is considered a base. I always think A comes before B. So, and 1 comes before 14. So you can kind of think of that order if you're trying to remember which one is which. So the further from 7, so something of a pH of 4 is a weaker acid than something with a pH of 1. And then something of a pH of 10 would be what we consider a base. And we'll talk more about the pH scale and why that's important in the next couple of lessons. So I hope that was helpful. Make sure to ask any questions when we're in class together. Thanks.